Let's call it Task Force M. M for Monster. Also known as...
Greetings and salutations, guys. Eric here with my review of Creature Commandos, the debut of James Gunn's new DCU. A few months before Superman will hit theaters, this is the first time we're getting any sort of look at what the new DCU will be, coming from James Gunn and Peter Safran. But it's an interesting way to debut it, right? Because it is this very quirky animated series aimed at an adult audience about very obscure characters. So it almost feels kind of like an appetizer, because by design, this show is not going to have the reach of a Superman movie. And there are certain people who just aren't going to check it out. But I think it's kind of cool to kind of sneak in this way, to lay the groundwork for what's to come and have this sort of soft opening, as it were, with these characters. So yeah, this is essentially feels like a Suicide Squad animated series. I mean, it could be basically subtitled, Tales of the Suicide Squad or From the Files of Suicide Squad, because it is about a new team that Amanda Waller, still voiced by Viola Davis here, forms in the wake of Task Force X has been disbanded, but now she starts Task Force M. If she can't use imprisoned humans and metahumans, she'll use imprisoned monsters. So this is a new team. They never use the term Suicide Squad, but that's what they are, who are sent out on missions. And it's a pretty wacky team that's culled from some pretty obscure parts of DC Comics. It includes the Bride, as in the Bride of Frankenstein, a character named Nina Mazursky, who's basically the creature from the Black Lagoon, skeletal Batman villain Dr. Phosphorus, G.I. Robot, whose name kind of says it all, and one holdover actually from Gunn's version of the Suicide Squad, Weasel. And the basic plot line here has them sent to protect a princess, voiced by Maria Bakalova, only to discover there might be more going on in this situation than it first seems, and that perhaps they are being manipulated. But the question is, by whom? It's important to note that this isn't just a project that James Gunn greenlit. He wrote all of it. He wrote all 7 episodes of this series, so this very much is from his creative mind. He's working alongside Dean Lorey, who serves as showrunner and has an excellent background in DC animation already because he worked on the terrific Harley Quinn series. Lorey also wrote Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. I don't need to mention that, but I do because it makes me very happy that he wrote Jason Goes to Hell. But of course, Gunn, creatively, he has this big background in DC, the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, to extremely strong effect. I think both those projects are excellent. So there's a pretty high bar as far as Gunn working creatively in the DC universe, whether it's officially him calling the shots or not. And I think that this show almost reaches that. It feels a little more slight than those other projects. I definitely enjoyed it. It kind of has all the things you want from a James Gunn project, but maybe not quite as impactful along the way. It is funny. It is subversive. It is, body and graphic. It is definitely, a animated series meant for adults. There is nudity and sex, and there is plenty of F-bombs and really graphic ways that some people are killed along the way. The fact that Dr. Phosphorus can basically touch you and dissolve through your flesh is very effectively depicted many times in this series. So all of that stuff really works if you are, someone who already knows that you vibe with James Gunn and what he brings to a fictional world like this. It delivers all of that. The music is great, as you might expect from a Gunn project. He goes for some pretty obscure, I should say for Americans, music here. Lots of overseas foreign language rock and pop songs that work really well, or some by American groups that can sound a lot like they're coming from overseas. And I think the animation style and the slightly askew approach to the characters works very well with this story. But a real big secret to James Gunn's success is how much heart his shows have and how they can be funny and eclectic and then suddenly hit you hard and make you cry. And I was a little worried as I was watching Creature Commandos that I wasn't getting that side of it. It does come. And, the episodes basically format-wise, almost all of them are a flashback included to one of the team members earlier in their life. Not quite an origin story all the time, though often they are, but telling you tales from their past and something that sort of has helped guide them to where they are now. And there is one that hits hard, that really did get me emotionally. And there are some other moments that happen later on in the series that I think also are extremely effective on that front. though there sometimes it feels like we don't get enough time with them in the aftermath. There are some things that happen that are very sad and upsetting and impact the characters, but I don't think that we would kind of spend enough time with how they feel about that afterwards. It does kind of feel like the show is moving at a fast pace that sometimes maybe it could slow down a little bit more. But by and large, this is just a very enjoyable show. And as someone who loved James Gunn's version of the Suicide Squad, I do like getting to see him play in this sort of realm again in an animated series format. It lends itself to his sensibilities. It works really well. And that does kind of bring us to the whole, the beginning of the DCU of it all and how much importance this show has that it wouldn't have otherwise. Because if you didn't know all that was happening behind the scenes, this would just feel like a continuation of the things he'd established in the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, because it continues so many of the events. And he's talked about this and the fact that nothing is canon going forward from those old movies until they talk about it in these new shows. Well, this show, right off the bat, besides the fact that Viola Davis is still playing Amanda Waller, well, guess what? She talks about things that happened in the Suicide Squad. She talks about things that happened in Peacemaker. So instantly, those are made canon in the DCU. And it just feels like a continuation of that. And, I didn't talk about Frank Grillo yet, voicing Rick Flag Sr., but he's one of the main characters. And like his son, he is sent out to kind of oversee the team. And he is supposed to be the father of the guy we saw, in those movies, the guy who has now died. And he's kind of living with that burden of that death. And that all affects, what is happening here. So it is interesting, this sort of balance between here's the launch of something new, but it's also pretty much a continuation of a lot of things we saw before in this specific show. And I know Superman's going to kind of be its own thing in a much different, bigger way. But this is, like I said, kind of this softer launch because it is sort of taking the baton so directly from events that happened in the past. I know that this will be a cause of a lot of debate of people who are really angry that there's any remnants, and why don't they just split it off? Or they're angry because they want more held over, and they're like, well, why does this get to stick around? Doesn't really bother me. I do think it's, it's a little wacky, it's a little strange, and it'll confuse people a little bit, but I think you can kind of just roll with it. And, on the casting side, it is interesting that he's already talked about how he is casting actors here who he wants to use in live action, or if he casts them in an animated show, he intends to use them in live action should they ever be used as characters. Frank Grillo, we know, is going to be in Superman and Peacemaker Season 2 playing Rick Flag Sr., so that for sure is continuing forward. And there's other characters here where you kind of feel like, oh, well, yes, all these actors. And it's a great cast. I haven't really talked about all the people voicing these characters. Indira Varma, Zoe Chow, Sean Gunn, Alan Tudyk, all these people could very much play these characters. And there's even sometimes some supporting or peripheral characters come in, and I recognize Linda Cardellini's voice, and I look at how the character is designed, and it's not like she's drawn to look exactly like Linda Cardellini, but you're like, oh, well, if they want to use that character in live action, Linda Cardellini's just a phone call away. It's a fun group of characters. Some pop more than others. I definitely enjoyed G.I. Robot, who is just all about killing Nazis. That is his primary function. That's what he exists to do. And he basically enters every room wondering, is there a Nazi here for me to kill? It's a very funny character. And then I came to really enjoy Frankenstein, another character I didn't mention yet, because he's not part of the team. He is kind of this sort of this X factor, this other presence in the show, voiced by David Harbour, or Eric Frankenstein, I should say, is his full name, who is just hell-bent on being with the bride who wants nothing to do with him, and he has a deep history with her, which one of the episodes gets into, and just his whole philosophy, the way he looks at the world is very messed up and definitely twisted, but also very funny. And, this is a show about very amoral characters, by and large, like the Suicide Squad, but even more so here in some ways, because most of this team will just sort of, kill without thinking about it. But there are some exceptions, both for these people and what makes them, or monsters, I should say, when they make decisions whether to kill or not. And then a couple of the characters definitely have some more misgivings than others. And so that is an interesting dynamic within the group as we go forward. This is a show dealing with, these pretty obscure characters in their pretty specific corner of the world. But as we are launching the DCU here, there is definitely some interesting ties to the larger DC universe. And a lot of the heavy hitters get at least referenced, name dropped. Maybe we get little glimpses of their world through other characters. Cersei, I know, has been revealed as one of the villains in this. She is a character who's typically a Wonder Woman villain. there is Dr. Phosphorus is one of the members of the team, and he's usually a Batman villain. He's not the only part of this show that ties to sort of Batman's rogues gallery in an interesting way, especially when you think about the fact that anything that's established here could have consequences down the line. And so those little glimpses are definitely intriguing and fun for those of us like myself who are, obsessed on looking for all those little ties and how things that, could be inconsequential in the context of this show maybe could have some impact, 3 years from now in some big movie we haven't seen yet. I mentioned at the top that, there's just some people who will never watch this show because there's just, some people, adults, I should say, that will just never watch animation. And, I know this came up a lot when Ahsoka came on and people were saying, oh, well, this is kind of a continuation of Star Wars Rebels. You should watch Star Wars Rebels. And people who just were like, well, I'm never going to watch that. I'm never going to watch that cartoon that you're telling me leads into this animated series. And so, there's going to be some people who this will just not be for them. And that's okay. And also, I think it makes it kind of a cool little thing that this is how they're launching the DCU. Because Superman's going to get so much promotion next year. And you will not be able to miss that Superman is debuting. But some people will miss Creature Commandos is debuting because it's just not something that will be on their radar at all. So I think that the fact that it is, focusing on obscure characters already has, a mature label on it so kids can't even watch it. And then there's adults who just won't watch, what they deem as in, cartoons, and it's just something that they dismiss altogether. It is a fun little, point of entry for those of us who want to see all of this. And for those of us who are fans of James Gunn and just want to see everything that he's putting out because he's a really great creative force. And now he's also the boss at this big company. So this is our first little glimpse. I'm excited about what's to come next. I think the Creature Commandos is this, this nice little setup for what I think is going to be some big things as this starts to, grow and grow and grow in years to come. So those are my thoughts on Creature Commandos. The first 2 episodes will be on Max on December 5th, and then it'll be weekly after that. All right, guys, if you could subscribe, that would be great. Thanks a lot. Take care.